interesting thing that's come up with the foot massages is I've been asked a few times about what would be the perfect foot soak to use by patients or to suggest to patients who are having not just a foot massage but have foot problems that may need that. And the most important thing to remember is it's just like everything else, but there are some fundamental differences when we're using topical herbs in a foot soak or a hand soak or an elbow soak that's different from internal herbs. The first is that no matter what, we have a penetration issue, right? So we have to make sure that our herbs go in and penetrate. Therefore, if we use herbs that are too cold by actual qi, not by action, right? So mint is cool in the mouth, but other herbs are considered cold because they lessen the amount of qi in the area, so therefore it goes cold. But they're not cold if you were to stick them in your mouth. So cinnamon is warm in the mouth, foods is not. So foods is in the hot category, but it's not actually hot. It's only considered hot because it moves yang. Yang is a hot idea, right? So keeping that in mind is that unless something was truly awfully like red, huge, inflamed, even then, there has to be some sort of warm or penetrating herb in the formula, even if it's going to be dominantly cold because it's red, it's swollen, it's pussy, whatever it may be. The two most favorite ones to use that are as neutral as it gets for something that's aggravated, red, and mean is dangui as a very, very common foot soak herb. So we want a dangui in there that's going to warm and allow penetration without it's going to move the blood with a warming way and then allow your cold herbs to get in. The other is, of course, togucao. Togucao, penetrate to the bone grass, is a great thing to have in a lot of soaks, topicals, etc. So those two are good drivers, and then your foot soak, it may have herbs that are going to help get rid of swelling. So you might have pugong you might have zihua diding, you might have baijiang cao, you might have a variety of herbs that are going to cool and get rid of swelling, things like that. If there's pus or there's a nasty fungal infection or something like that, then our herbs more likely would be in like the huanglian, huangbai, kushan, killing things. I like to balance my roots out with a couple of flowers that also are like that, or leaves. I never used Jin-Huai in the past. Now Jin-Huai quality is excellent, so I do use Jin-Huai. So I would balance out a huanglian or kushan being one of my favorites, with a light flower like Jin-Huai, or a daqingye, a light leaf that is also gets rid of toxicity. But even then, I want to make sure that the herbs are going to penetrate. So that's where that dangui togucao is. Once we move into a situation where we think we can use warm or we need warm, hot herbs in there, the most famous ones for foot soaks are obviously going to be rogui ganjiang. So you will see rogui, ganjiang, and dangui in a lot of foot soaks that are medicinal. So you're dealing with old injuries, you're dealing with neuropathy, you're dealing with infertility. For instance, a lot of fertility issues where there's cold in the channel, the foot soaks are going to really allow that heat to go up the line. So remember, it doesn't have to be a foot injury that we're using them for. And then we will pair accordingly after that. But being clear on how we're going to penetrate is very important. And then whether there's something we have to kill, a wound, a fungal infection, or we're just settling and calming and draining is very important. Because huanglian is another herb that's not actually very cool by taste, but it kills, there's less qi, therefore it's cold, right? So it falls into that category. So with rogui, ganjiang, and dangui as the warming drivers. Let's say we're dealing with some sort of trauma or injury. Traditionally, ruxiang and moyao. I need to remake friends with them. In the mainland, I never even thought about it. I just wrote it in people's formulas. They took their formulas. But I've had so many people here who get nauseous from it or can't drink the ruxiang and moyao, as well as something I never paid attention to in the mainland because everybody has their pot that never gets used for anything but herbs, that it creates a glaze in there and would be hard to clean. So at some point I'm gonna have to spend a little time figuring out how to make ruxiang moyao palatable. I have tried essential oils where they add a drop of a internally safe to take essential oil of ruxiang or moyao, but it tends to make people nauseous in this country. So I haven't solved that yet, but that would be something that would be traditionally in there. And if money wasn't an object, they could put in squirts of essential oil as opposed to trying to boil up and glazing their pots. So ruxiang, moyao are very important. Two other herbs that you will often see in foot soaks ground is taoren and xingren. The taoren makes sense. The xingren, people are like, well, that's a little strange. Actually, you're basically using almond, apricot, peach kernel, seed oil, and it's quite nice on the skin, right? So that's why it's in there along with doing what it does. It adds a moisture to it if you were trying to get rid of irritation. From there, I don't use any animal products, but in the mainland, the next thing you're going to see once you know whether you're cold or hot is you're going to see the poison millipedes, you're going to see the snakes, you're going to see the scorpions, you're going to see things that have literally dew or toxicity in them to go in and treat. The same way that people are using bee stings for medicine as well, you're using toxicity the same way now toad venom has become the darling that fixes everything. It does not fix everything, and beings, never mind. We're gonna leave that one alone. So for me, I will be using larger doses of the warming herbs, and then I'll tend to lean to honghua, ezhu, herbs that are going to have that ability to go in and really create some movement. I will tell you that unless you're fixing a specific problem like toes that are unhealthy, toenails that are unhealthy, if you're really trying to fix the foot, to be truly successful, the soak has got to be well above the ankle. So you have a lot of people and then they just soak their foot and they're like, oh, I'm soaking my foot. You really want the juju of the herbs to at least be at Sanyin Jiao spleen 6. But for me, I like Li Go or mid shin to really make that difference. And crossing that ankle and allowing the warmth to go up the channels is so much more effective than it is to just have the foot part in a foot soak. Remember, I'm saying foot soak, but you could stick an elbow, you could stick a hand. It's the same idea. The other thing to be aware of is whether or not we want to add things like bingpian or pengsha or huashi or zhangnao or bohenao, right? So do we want borneol to really make things cool and take down swelling, pain, etc.? Bingpian is a great herb. Literally ice flakes or ice shavings is what it's called in Chinese because it's so cooling. And it is a very important herb and in pretty much everything that's designed to cool, calm, and settle. Bohenao or menthol, I think it is in English, but literally mint essence. Same thing, you'll find it in a lot of cooling, calming, settling, getting rid of that. So bee stings, swellings, rashes that are mean are going to have that bingpian and bohenao. Zhangnao, camphor, can be used both ways, but its most important is it really creates deep penetration. So zhangnao is a wonderful herb to help drive other herbs in and create movement. It's why it's in almost every topical will have zhangnao in them to drive it in. And our zhangnao that we just got is so much better, the one that's from India. And it's important to know that, you know, if you have these stocked and they're not knocking your socks off, toss them and buy a better brand, because they should be very strong and they should not in any way be unimpressive. The Bingpian, the Bohenao, the Jiangnao are really critical topical herbs. They're in all the salves, they're in everything else like that, the alcohol soaks. And I can put those in. Do want to pay attention that if you are using those, they are going to be breathing a lot of them, and there's nothing unhealthy with it. However, some people are very sensitive, some people get dizzy. If you have a patient who's got some issues and you think maybe I'll give them a foot soak because I don't want to give them an internal, and then they're like, oh, and then they're breathing that and then they pass out on you, that's no good. So know your audience, and just be aware that there are people whose sensitivity levels are such that they will get very dizzy. It's the famous thing of needling stomach 36 sitting. People will just pass out, whereas if you needle it lying down, they won't. It just, a lot of those fragrances can really drop that. Huasher talc is a soother, a calmer, so it's very nice. It's going to help calm and soothe things in there. We just want to use things like that. But as simple as is, if somebody had some scary toenail fungus and things like that, I might prescribe some Kushan, some Jin-Huai, and then maybe some Togucao or Dangui. Keep it very simple, all right? If somebody came in and they've got numbness, neuropathy, cold feet, then I'm going to have Rogui, Ganjiang, Dangui. Keep it simple. I could add Honghua, but Honghua smells terrible. So if they don't have a real problem that they know they need to fix and I need to fix, I want to pick herbs that are going to be pleasant to look at. Nobody needs to stick their hand and see scorpions floating around in there, unless they're like the person who comes in with like the Kung Fu thing and is like, I love Kung Fu Chinese medicine. And you're like, you got to give him a scorpion if you have them, because then he goes home and it's going to be totally placebo. He's going to be miraculously cured because he thought he got that something magical, right? So again, know your audience, but just keeping it simple so that you can do so. Jiuhua, chrysanthemum is great. Ye-Jiuhua, we no longer stock it because when it went out of stock, we just stopped stocking it. But that's another great one to calm, cool, and clear. So just if you do have someone that you're working on or someone asks the question, just remember you have to penetrate, and then cooling herbs by toxicity or cooling herbs by actual feeling, right? Because it's red, it's mean inflamed, or it's got something nasty and you're using bitter herbs to kill that happen to be cold. And then warming, I am using warming and then what? Warming and moving, warming and soothing, warming and there. And that'll help you understand that matrix of Dangui, Togucao, and then your cold herbs or your warmer herbs is all you have to really know. It's not hard. Don't make it hard. You want to have fun. You want to make it crazy. You could go and buy an entire box of chai tea and then throw all those bags in there, pour boiling water in there, and you've got black pepper, you've got clove, you've got all these things that it's all the same thing. You could use those ingredients as well. It's just a question of how much needs to be palpable warm, how much needs to be movement warm, how much needs to be kill, how much needs to be calming, how much we want to soften and soothe the skin, so the talc, the huasher, the xingren, the taoren, how much do we need to do whatever we're doing. Are there any questions? Pretty easy, right? The most important thing is that there's no such thing as like the secret herb or the right herb. It's just being clear on your flavor and nature, what you want to do, and then getting it done, and then choosing whether or not to, I don't know where our tea bags are, whether or not that you want to put the herbs in a satchel or a cheesecloth or let them float. This time of year, it's a little warm out, but it tends to be cold anyways. A foot soak, once they've had it, or their hand soak, I have them just put it on the porch, temperature drops, and they can use that same pot back and forth 2-3 days. In the summer, it starts to get a little funky, so I'm not a big fan of it going multiple days. The disciplined person who has a real problem will rapid cool it and then be able to store it and then be able to reheat it. But letting the herbs sit out, things can go funky. So your choice of how long one foot soak bag will last is if you can keep it in the pot with the liquid and it's winter and they can bring it to heat and then they can put it in the cold porch, it can last days. And then if it's not, you just want to judge accordingly. Obviously, if you're treating anything with wounds or like the nail beds have lots of fungus, you wouldn't want to let the herbs go gross and have them soak in it, right? The more cushion you have, the longer things last. But just remember, it's common sense that way. In terms of boiling, I like to, in a perfect world with a patient that you trust, is nice big pot, and you want to get like the lobster pot or the casserole pots that fit the size of the foot if you have it. But what I'll do is you bring it to a boil, you simmer for the first time, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. They take it off and then they let it sit. And as it starts to cool, I'll have them steam their foot, right? And we're assuming that we're in a cheesecloth here, okay? So there's not herbs floating loose. But steam the foot, steam the foot. And then you have tongs and a cloth, small cloth. Drop the cloth in, bring the cloth up with the tongs, let it cool, then put the cloth on it. The reason why we're doing this is it's too hot to stick your foot in, right? You'd burn your foot. So first you steam, then you use the cloth with liquid, and then by then it's cool enough to go in, but you've already been doing it for about 15 minutes is prepping it. So when you put your foot in there, you can foot soak for 20 minutes, but you get much more out of it. Whereas if you let the pot go to a point where you could put your foot in and then it goes cool pretty quickly, you didn't get the same amount of time on it. So just pay attention to common sense, steaming it, then cloth, then foot soaking or hand soaking or elbow soaking or whatever it is the way I go. Remember, don't make it complicated. Doing something is very effective. Making it complicated and then they can't do it or you can't put it together means they just didn't get a treatment. None of this was ever meant to be hard medicine. We were just supposed to be using whatever's at hand. As I always tell the story of my first herb class is, I sat down with Professor Wong and he was like, "Are you ready?" And I'm like, "I'm ready." I'm like 20, I'm so excited, right? I'm gonna study herbs, I'm in China. And he says, "Come with me." And we ran downstairs and he grabbed some Chuqiansao out of the coal heap where people spit and piss. And I watched him just grabbed it and then he took it upstairs, he boiled it, and then he gave me a cup of it. And I thought, oh boy, here goes hepatitis. But I was excited. So remembering it is that simple. Start like that and then move up there. Herbs you could mash to make pulpiness, herbs to make things more slippery. So you could put in some, never mind. We're not going to get into a long thing here, but I just wanted to cover that as people are starting to ask, well, could I do something for my feet for a foot soak?